Here is part 2 of session 11. We have a little mix today because there is some alien technology that we're going to discuss, not in the ways that we're used to, Nikola Tesla, and we have some other information that I think is pretty cool, and we're going to start with that, so let's begin. Okay, so we are used to hearing that we get alien technology through like the Roswell crash, which created a physical manifestation of something we've never had our hands on, and from there we develop a lot of stuff like Kevlar and fiber optics and so on. And that is just one way that we can acquire technology, which is like the hard way. But there's another way that we have been getting this, what you would call downloads in humanity over time. And of course it has to do with the entities that want to further an agenda here, and that's what we're going to get into. Of course, we can't talk about modern technology without talking about Tesla. So Don, even in 1981, was very interested in getting into Tesla's information, and we have some of that too. But today we're going to start with something that is part of this session, is the first question that I have, and I think it's going to develop a little bit of a conversation here because it's how we achieve social memory complex status, so to speak, and what that actually means. So let's begin with that question, and from there, after we explain that, we're going to get into the alien technology. At what stage does a planet achieve social memory? Ra explains, a mind-body-spirit social complex becomes a social memory complex when its entire group of entities are of one orientation or seeking. The group memory lost to the individuals in the roots of the tree of mind then becomes known to the social complex, thus creating a social memory complex. The advantages of this complex are the relative lack of distortion in understanding the social beingness and the relative lack of distortion in pursuing the direction of seeking. For all understanding distortions are available to the entities of the society. So this is something little known in terms of the densities of consciousness and the ability to create a social memory complex. Now, while this is properly part of fourth density, as Ra explains in other sessions, this can happen in third density and it can happen in fifth density apparently. So it is a phenomenon that happens in fourth density when we start seeking more love and understanding, and then we become more, and it's all, it has to do a lot also with the ability that we have in fourth density to know each other's thoughts, distortions and understandings. We start nurturing that type of information within the group, and thus we become the social memory complex, where we all share our thoughts and our direction and orientation. For this, a lot of things need to be aligned, of course. We need to be either positively or negatively oriented. And for that, we need to have a clear understanding of what our direction is. For that also, we need to share our thoughts and everything. So again, while it is mainly a thing for fourth density beings, it can happen in third density, and it's not unheard of, but it's quite rare too. So that's one thing. Now, the advantages, as Ra is explaining here, is that we now share our understanding. So I know what you're going through. I feel what you feel. So we start connecting, and this is also part of the ability of oneness, or seeking oneness within the universe, that we now understand each other a lot more. You can see this with animals. Like, animals are part of a whole organism, if you will, and they don't understand each other too well, but they're just being part, like cells within an organism. They are not fully aware, or they're not aware at all, because awareness comes in third density. So in third density, we begin to understand each other with language and with the illusion of separation and seeing each other. And this is all the dance that Ra explains or talks about that we have here. And it's the dance and the game that we play here in third density to know that we are not separate from nature, to know that we're actually just one within the consciousness of the universe. And as we go go up in the levels or densities of consciousness, then this becomes just part of our nature, part of our reality, that we share these feelings, emotion, thoughts, orientations, anything that describes us as entities. And it's just a beautiful way for me to visualize the idea that we come from an organism inherently, which it is second density, say in planet Earth. And as animals, we evolve into separation just to see and play the game of the orientation that we're seeking, which is either positive or negative, which actually creates the illusion that we are going through experiences, because all experiences in the end are an illusion of the creator. And as you go through them and you climb up the densities of consciousness, now you start becoming more aware of your own nature, which is where you came from, which is source, which is unity. And the higher you go, the more oneness there is. And that's why, actually, very appropriately, is the law of one, because in sixth density is where you have to become one to go to seven. There is no other way. And that's why negatively oriented entities, once they get to sixth density, they have to completely polarize towards, actually depolarize themselves to become one, because there is no positive or negative, there's no right or wrong. And anyhow, that's just my long explanation to why I think it's so cool to talk about how we achieve social memory complex and what that actually means. As you can see, Ra has a distinction between mind, body, spirit, social complex, which is what we are right now. We are a mind, body, spirit, social complex on the earth, but we haven't achieved memory complex yet, because we don't have that oneness or that approach to oneness that we should have. So that's it for this slide. I know it's a little bit long, but I really get all pumped up with this stuff. So now we go into the next question, where Don is asking, then we have crusaders from Orion coming to this planet for mind control purposes. How do they do this? Ross says, as all, they follow the law of one, observing free will. Contact is made with those who call. Those then upon the planetary sphere act much as do you to disseminate the attitudes and philosophy of their particular understanding of the law of one, which is service to self. These become the elite. Through these, the attempt begins to create a condition whereby the remainder of the planetary entities are enslaved by their own free will. And this is just Don asking, how do these crusaders come here and affect their teachings, basically, or their agenda here? And Raj just says that that's how it works. I mean, we've talked about this in previous sessions, where the Orion group, as part of the Crusaders, they come here, and Ra is now saying that much in the same way that the Confederation, which again is positively oriented, and the Orion group and the Crusaders are negatively oriented, the same way they both act into disseminating information. Now, the way negatively oriented entities do it is by manipulation. First, they bring the material, which we're going to explain in the next slides, and from there they start propagating this into the civilization, so they can create this manipulative system by which everybody else is enslaved by their own free will, which is very important. So they basically come here, get their information through the law of one, to enslave people, and those who get the information initially, who are the ones seeking it, become the elite. And we have plenty of examples here in this earth about the elite and how they have created this illusion of control, which is also part of the equation, that we give our free will when we decide to work for a corporation or for something or for somebody, for that effect. We are doing it of our own free will. We create this as an illusion that we need to work, to get money and to live our lives. And this is all a self-perpetuated illusion, which can get really complex, but that's how it's actually created from the top, being from the Crusaders and the Orion group, to the humans that have been calling this law of one orientation towards the negative, to the people who are actually enslaved, like us, into believing that we need a monetary system, that we need a stratified social complex in terms of how we have hierarchies of people and classes and all this stuff. So that's just how they disseminate it. Let's continue on. Don continues asking, can you name any of the recipients of the Crusaders? That is, any names that may be known to on the planet today. And this is another sneaky question from Don. Ra says, I am desirous of being in non-violation of the free will distortion. To name those involved in the future of your space-time is to infringe. Thus, we withhold this information. We request your contemplation of the fruits of the actions of those entities whom you may observe enjoying the distortion towards power. In this way, you may discern for yourself this information. We shall not interfere with the, shall we say, planetary game. It is not central to the harvest. I think it's funny that he says it's not central to the harvest because you can tell that Ra was just concerned with basically disseminating the law of one for the harvest. That's all they care, to be honest. And we should care about that too, especially because we need to guide our orientation wherever we have to go to. But anyhow, what he is explaining here is that he can't give any names, of course. You know, on Earth, there's people, and there was people in the past and now who have been manipulated and also who seek the Orion Group, and they have been working with the Orion Group for a long time. We know these people as the ones who have either bloodlines, family, they have secret societies, they have groups, and this is all common knowledge within, you know, the rabbit hole that comes with the understanding of our social structures. So he's saying that, but also he says something really important. He says, please contemplate the actions of those you think are the elites so you can actually get information out of that, and you can make up your own opinion and learn from it, because that's part of the game that Ra is saying, like, we don't want to interfere. So it's a useful exercise to just think about those we think are being manipulated, or those who are working directly with the Orion Group or the Crusaders to disseminate this information, and how they create this structure, like I was saying before, which is really for us to pierce through the illusion the idea that we need these kind of these lifestyles and all this stuff. But then again, that's part of the awakening process. Getting a little sidetracked there, but let's go on. Don says then, how did the Crusaders pass on their concepts to the incarnate individuals on Earth? Ra explains, there are two main ways, just as there are two main ways of, shall we say, polarizing towards service to others. There are those mind-body-spirit complexes upon your plane who do exercises and perform disciplines in order to seek contact with sources of information and power leading to the opening of the gate to intelligent infinity. There are others whose vibratory complex is such that this gateway is open and contact with total service to self, with its primal distortion of manipulation of others, is then afforded with little or no difficulty, no training, and no control. So this just explains briefly how it works. There's either people who are actively seeking this through rituals and through disciplines that call upon the service of these negatively oriented entities, and they get rewarded and gifted with the information that they need. A lot of people have been doing this, and I've said this already in this video enough. But then there's also people who have access. Like I would actually speculate to say that Genghis Khan and Rasputin, like we said in the last session, the last video, is that they actually had this access to intelligent infinity by normal beings. Like they just had it in themselves. So they didn't have to call for somebody to relay the information. They just had access to it. So those are the two ways that this can be disseminated. Let's go on. What type of information is passed on from the Crusaders to these people? The Orion Group passes on information concerning the law of one with the orientation of service to self. The information can become technical just as some in the Confederation, in attempts to aid this planet in service to others, have provided what you would call technical information. The technology provided by this group is in the form of various means of control or manipulation of others to serve the self. So, quite simple here. We have been getting information from the Confederation, like we have seen. They tried with Charlie Hickson in the abduction, and they try to give information, but that didn't actually work that well, according to Ra. But they do that, and they give information through technical means, or basically give technical information through means of telepathy, and that's how they give either techniques or technology itself, which we're going to get into right away. But that's just what Ra is saying here. Do you mean then that some scientists receive technical information, shall we say telepathically, that comes out then as usable gadgetry? That is correct. However, very positively, as you would call the distortion, oriented so-called scientists have received information intended to unlock peaceful means of progress, which redounded onto the last echoes of potential destruction due to further reception of other scientists of a negative orientation distortion. Pretty quick here. This information that we get, even if it's positively oriented by the Confederation in this case, they give us the information, but that information gets into the hands of other scientists or so-called scientists that have a negative orientation, and because of that they create something negative out of it. So that's just the way of it. Don asks, is this how we learn of nuclear energy? Was it mixed, both positive and negative orientation? This is correct, says Ra. The entities responsible for the gathering of the scientists were of a mixed orientation. The scientists were overwhelmingly positive in their orientation. The scientists who followed their work were of mixed orientation, including one extremely negative entity, as you would term it. Is this extremely negative entity still incarnate on Earth? This is correct. Then I assume you can't name him, and would ask you where Nikola Tesla got his information. The one known as Nikola received information from Confederation sources, desirous of aiding this extremely, shall we say, angelically positive entity in bettering the existence of its fellow mind-body-spirit complexes. It is unfortunate, shall we say, that like many wanderers, the vibratory distortions of third density illusion caused this entity to become extremely distorted in its perception of its fellow mind-body-spirit complexes, so that its mission was hindered and, in the result, perverted from its purposes. So first, Don is asking if, that's how we got our nuclear energy. Like I explained, yes, we got it. It got distorted by other scientists who were negatively oriented, including somebody who was extremely negatively oriented. I don't know who that was. 1981, he was still alive, as Ross said, but who knows? Speculation. Then he asked about how, obviously, Nikola Tesla, and he says that, yeah, he received information from the Confederation that they were desirous of giving this information to somebody like a wanderer, this extremely angelical, positive entity. I mean, this is why Tesla is loved so much. He was a wanderer who was like so in tune with his purpose here, and he needed to be aided by the Confederation to further this. I mean, we're gonna get into what he was supposed to do here. Just one of his purposes, which was brilliant, but well, it got all distorted because of his peers and everything else that we know now. It's been over 100 years, I believe, or close to 100 years, where he tapped into free energy, which could have changed dramatically the history of our planet. But everything comes for a reason, and everything has a purpose in terms of the catalyst that is available to us. So I wouldn't even call it, even though Rock calls it unfortunate, I think it's still generating a lot of catalyst for us to live by. So let's go on with what Don has to ask about Tesla. And he says, How was Tesla's work supposed to benefit man on Earth, and what were its purposes? Ra explains, the most desired purpose of the mind-body-spirit complex Nikola was the freeing of all planetary entities from darkness. Thus, it attempted to give to the planet the infinite energy of the planetary sphere for use in lighting and power. By freeing the planetary entities from darkness, precisely what do you mean? We intended to speak of freeing those of your planet from literal darkness. Would this freeing from darkness be commensurate with the law of one? Or does this have any real products? The product of such a freeing would create two experiences. Firstly, the experience of no need to find the necessary emolument for payment in your money for energy. Secondly, the leisure afforded, thereby exemplifying the possibility and enhancing the probability of the freedom to then search the self for the beginning of seeking the law of one. Few there are working physically from daybreak to darkness, as you name them, upon your plane who can contemplate the law of one in a conscious fashion. Okay, so it got a little hectic there with the terminology, but Don is asking, what was his purpose? Purpose was to free humanity from darkness, in a literal sense, as he explains, Ra explains. And that has to do with freeing us from the need of seeking the sun, to have to work and then go to bed at night and all. I mean, we still had this kind of mentality, even though we had electricity already, but he was enhancing this to the point that it was, we didn't have to pay for energy, basically. And the two ways that it was going to free us from this darkness, which is literal, is, I think there's also not literal sense there, but that's what it says. And I think, well, it would be a side effect of this, which is kind of implied here, that after we are freed from the darkness, meaning that we have energy, light whenever we want, we would have, first of all, not to pay for money, not to pay for electricity or energy in general, because we don't need the money for that. That would literally change the whole structure that we have in our planet, because we as a society live because of energy. Energy is everything. Energy is food. Energy is not only the light that we see, but how we power our cars, how we move, how we travel, everything. So if we would have free energy, like we must have had 100 years ago, we would be a completely different society. So not only not paying for electricity or energy, but also we would free ourselves from the need to work. And like he says, few there are who work during the day and sleep at night that can contemplate the law of one. Imagine the contemplation, meditation, and just the reach that we could have if we had free energy. So that's what Tesla was about to bring to the planet 100 years ago or so. And we didn't achieve that. So pains my heart, but that's what we have. Let's go on with the rest of the questions. What about the Industrial Revolution in general? Was this planned in any way? Ross says, this is correct. Wanderers incarnated in several waves, as you may call them, in order to bring into existence the gradual freeing from the demands of the diurnal cycles and lack of freedom of leisure. And the last part that he asks is, I don't know if this is a short question or not, so we can save it till next time. But my only question is why the Crusaders from Orion do this. What is their ultimate objective? This is probably too long to answer. Now again, Don is asking here, as I have noted, after he asked the question if they could do something to alleviate the instrument, which is Carla. But the answer to this question, in any case, is this is not too long to answer. To serve the self is to serve all. The service to self, when seen in this perspective, requires an ever-expanding use of the energies of others for manipulation to the benefit of the self with distortion towards power. If there are further queries to more fully explicate this subject, we shall be with you again. And that ends up these questions and answers. There's one portion where he says the Industrial Revolution came thanks to wanderers that came here and wanted to accelerate, obviously, our industrial capacity. Of course, everything gets tarnished by those negatively oriented, but that was the purpose of that too. And then Don is asking if what do the Crusaders do here? And that's the answer that Ra gives. First, they come here because they have an agenda. That's just, you know, who they are. But also, serving the self, like he explained, I think this is a pretty good note to end this video, is that this is a reflection in general with what he's saying, because the service of the self, like he's saying, when seen in this perspective, requires an ever-expanding use of the energies of others for manipulation to the benefit of the self with distortion towards power. This, even though it sounds very negative in one side, you have to see the other side. And on the other side, we see that whenever we are presented with something negative, and again, this is my speculation and my interpretation of what this means to confront the negative or the negativity in the world, is that we have a clear contrast by which we can see ourselves, whether we are familiar with the concept of being manipulative and just toward the distortion of power, or we reject it, which is totally fine. That's how we polarize ourselves. We cannot polarize ourselves towards the positive if we don't have enough negativity. Now, we may get to the point where we think that there's too much negativity in the world, but that's because we have a lack of understanding of catalyst that is available to us for us to further polarize towards the positive. So, in simple words, what I'm trying to say here is that all those who are negative oriented in our planet today, in the Orion group, Crusaders, and even in sex density negative in the lower portions of it, they are creating this for us to polarize towards the positive. And this is the biggest teaching that we can have in third density. Because of this, we have the environment, we have the possibility to further even more catapult our positive being, our positive orientation to where we want to go, which is 4th, 5th, 6th density. And after all, we go back to Source in 7th density with the Law of Eternity. So with that note, I leave you guys. Thank you so much for watching session 11. We'll be back with session 12 next week. Much love to you. You know already everything about my description box, comments, and of course, like, subscribe if you haven't done it already. Much love to you. Please send me love because I'm always receiving it. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week.